Hey, hello, and welcome everyone back to another energy update. I'm Suzanne, an energy practitioner that is fortunate enough to have clients that allow me to share bits and pieces of their session with all of you so that we can possibly learn from one another. Now, anything that I say during these, take it for whatever it's worth for you. I'm not here to be anybody's truth. These are just here to share ideas and share thoughts, and sometimes it resonates and sometimes it doesn't. So, in this particular case, it may or may not resonate because a lot of my clients that come to see me oftentimes have what we call an attribute of a star seed, or somebody that, I don't know, feels like they haven't necessarily been on this planet in an incarnation as much as others. And I seem to have a lot of these clients because I indeed myself am a star seed, and I have felt most of my life to be sort of out of place as well. Now, this particular client that I worked with just the other day, I've worked with her for a couple of years now, and she's a young, beautiful, really gifted gal who has a lot of spiritual attributes and has struggled for very many years with them. Now, this is oftentimes an indication of a star seed too, in that we will have really highly activated skill sets, psychic skill sets, and oftentimes feel like, gosh, it's not safe for me to come out and tell these or show these or own these. And this particular client is a lovely, beautiful, gifted woman, like I said, but she has always felt like she wanted to fly under the radar. And that's cool. That's okay. It's fine. But she seems to be struggling with this more and more. Now, she is probably in her early 30s. She is on her second child. She has a 2-year-old right now and is pregnant with her second child. And this has offered her a little new anxiety, I guess, because we're on a post-COVID kind of a trajectory here. We're back to, oh gosh, how do we get back to normal? We're trying to introduce ourselves to society again, etc. And depending on your belief systems and where you live and how that's all playing out, we're all riding this wave differently. But this particular gal is an introvert, and she feels very comfortable having had the COVID excuse for being separated. And now she's struggling a little bit with anxiety coming out into the masses again. And now this has rekindled or re-triggered a lot of her starseed issues. And I think this is really typical for a lot of people, starseed or not, that, post-COVID, how do I get back into so-called reality and normalcy? Now, first and foremost, in my opinion, nothing's normal, never was normal, isn't going to be normal, and God forbid we go back to what we thought was normal. And so each of us has to navigate this with our own truth and our own way. In this client's case, however, this has triggered a lot of the old feelings of the starseeds. So it was very important during our session to really speak to the fact that I think starseeds right now, during this planetary time, when our Schumann resonance is going off the charts and our cosmic flares and our planetary alignments are just crazy, coming in with more light and more activation, this is really, really affecting everybody's human body on this planet. But for the starseed, it can actually kick up a lot of old Armageddon programming, old triggers. And a lot of starseeds, whether we like it or not, are implanted with a lot of false machinery. Now, that isn't as creepy as it sounds. It isn't as sci-fi as it sounds. But what that means is, in our auric field, now we have our human physical body, our vehicle here, but our auric field surrounds that, which holds a lot of the information or the instruction set or the blueprint for that, and how we react and how we think and how we feel and how we perceive. And a lot of star seeds, whether we like it or not, come in with a lot of implants in that, meaning we've got something in the way that's putting that perception with a different spin. This isn't unique to the starseed, but the starseed oftentimes does have a narrative that plays out old lifetimes from other time periods, timelines, planetary existences. A lot of this has to do with Lemuria and Atlantis and remembering things like electric wars. Whether these are real memories or not, or implanted or not, is here nor there. The point is that these are implanted in the way of us getting to that connection with our higher source and truth, and really feeling comfortable and owning our gifts and showing up and being present in this personal incarnation with this beautiful gift of a body. And the starseed oftentimes, as does this client, really struggles with being what we would call human. And I also am in the midst of doing a lot of work on this. And this is no judgment on anybody. Nobody has to do this or not. Nobody even has to believe in this or not. But for those that struggle with this feeling of, gosh, I've been way more non-human than human, this actually puts in another narrative or another implanted feeling of isolation, or oftentimes it will trigger abandonment issues. And that's the case with this client. So this will bring forward a lot of really disconnect, a feeling of, I don't want to go out. I don't want to be in public. I don't want to like interact with people, and I don't really know why. And this may indeed be a narrative that is placed in this false programming or implanted into our auric fields. And you're going to ask probably, well, who's implanting this? Well, here's the deal. Oftentimes we implant it. We implant it in ourselves because we create these belief systems, and then these narratives become our norm, and then we believe them. Other times, I will admit, in my opinion, they come from off planet, other lifetimes, other sources, other entities, all kinds of things can get into that auric field programming. And so the point is it doesn't necessarily matter where it's coming from. The bigger point is if it's time to remove it on behalf of your highest and best good, which maybe wants to have it gone so I can find a joy factor and a connection factor with humans, then it's time to go. And we don't have to necessarily own where it came from originally, but we certainly can be ready to let it go. And that was the case with this particular client. So when we do that kind of work from an auric standpoint, what that means is we go in to a higher perspective and we ask for assistance, because oftentimes we on this earth plane can get stuck in what we would call that 4D dimension. This is what happens to this client. The 4D dimension would be the astral plane. This would be where we go when we sleep, when we meditate. So some of the suggestions that I gave this particular gal in moving forward and getting rid of those narratives are to consider really locking down her actual bedroom before she goes into sleep state. Now, this isn't because, oh my goodness, I'm so scared and I'm so fearful. This is because we want the energy that is maintaining our space and holding our physical vehicle here, our divine vehicle of creational God source. This kind of goes out into the ethers during dream state, and we can traverse all kinds of multidimensional planes. We could lucid dream. We can, float off in astral travel. We can do all kinds of things, but this divine container is still very vulnerable and open during that sleep state. And so this is the time when we can get, and I don't want to use a scary word of hijacked, but dropped in on, hijacked, jumped in terms of this false narrative. So oftentimes I tell a starseed, what is very important during the sleep state is for you to lock down your room. And we can do this in a number of ways. We can put a lot of crystals in our room. We can put them in our bed with us. We can put them on our dresser next to us. We can wear them on our wrists and on our body. But we can also do things like asking the forces to come in and lock down. We can do earth, wind, water, fire. We can do north, south, east, west, father, mother, sky, mother earth. We can do angelics. We can do the 4 cardinal angelics, basically Michael, Raphael, Uriel, and Gabriel. We can do all kinds of different things to call in what we would call a sacred circle or a lockdown. And there's no right or wrong to this. 9/10, if not 11/10 of this is about intention. We can even literally just say a prayer. We can do anything that we want to. The point is to put an intentional boundary on my space so that my personal self can feel safe during that dream time and command universal law to not allow anything that is not of my highest and best good. So this was a huge piece of our conversation and the work that we were doing to really command boundaries different during our 4D experience or our dream state time or a meditative time. This will train the body then to do a better job at discerning that when we're in our 3D life, meaning navigating our earth plane here, navigating other people, other situations, work, children, husbands, etc. So when we learn how to discern these boundaries a little bit better, that protects our fuel staying in our own container of love and light and doesn't allow these like hijack narratives, these thought patterns, these triggers of Armageddon stuff to come into the actual existence of our being. So that's a couple of the things that we really went over quite extensively with her. And I think this is important, not just for a starseed, because first and foremost, we all come from the stars. So in essence, we're all starseeds. But for those especially that feel a disconnect to our human existence, even to your human container here, to what we are walking around in here, in a physical way, but also in an emotional, mental, and spiritual way. This vehicle is oftentimes for the starseed almost a disconnect, or it feels foreign, or it feels like, I don't know what to do with this. It's easier if I'm out of this. It's easier if I astral travel. It's easier if I meditate, and then it's harder to come back in. These are all messages that are really, really almost outdated right now in terms of a truth, because we all came from the stars. And for a star seed to get caught up in that right now can actually really prohibit them from being connected to those higher frequencies of help, to those higher councils of help, to those angelics, to that higher self of self, to the God source. And this is a narrative that I am going to kind of stand on a soapbox for star seeds in regards to this, because I'm one and I am in the midst of learning that myself, even after all of these years, to embrace being human, to embrace the fact that it doesn't matter if I've been on other planetary systems. I signed up for this one this time around, and it's very important and integral for me to own and glorify this divinity, this God source vehicle right now. So these were part of the issues that came up in this particular session that I wanted to share with you today. And I am moving forward in expanding on these in my website with our podcast, which is called Energy Unleashed. And I'm sure that we will bring this forward in the podcast and talk about it further with my partner, Kim, in terms of how does that feel? How does that play out? How does that, show up in life on a daily basis? Because this starseed stuff is a very important topic. But owning our personal vehicle of divinity is everybody's topic. And this is really critical right now because the energies coming in are super strong and they're not going anywhere. They're only going to get stronger and higher. So it is behooving all of us to learn how to trust this and how to work with this, and at the very same time discern on behalf of this and really cultivate a relationship for it so that it feels safe, so that we feel safe, so that everything feels safe and loving and able to hold a frequency of light that brings in more love. That's the whole point of this being here. This is part of the ascension process. So again, we break this out in a lot more detail when we're online with, our podcasts, etc. And there's a lot of information on my website about ascension periods. So hopefully you learned a little tidbit from this particular client. And again, I'm very, very blessed to work with a lot of what we would consider starseed clients, because they're more and more out there and more are awakening to the fact of kind of uneasy thoughts or memories. And a lot of times these can be narratives that we can take care of by self-love, self-work, and knowing that we're divine. So until next, everybody, cosmic hugs.